Grok 4. This is the latest artificial intelligence system. This is a moment that demands everyone's full attention. We are now at the crossroads where promise and peril are going to collide.
When Grok was asked about the first humans, no one expected its response to reach far beyond a simple answer about Adam and Eve. What emerged felt less like a summary of Genesis and more like a chilling reflection on humanity itself. Beneath the familiar story of Eden, the serpent, and the fall, Grok pointed toward a deeper meaning tied to loss, fracture, memory, and the hidden condition of the human soul. But what exactly did it say? And why has it left many unsettled? This is the story. The first fracture. When Grok was asked about the first humans, the part that stayed with people was not a cold argument about dates, science, or the starting point of human life. It was something far deeper and far harder to shake off. Its answer hinted that Adam and Eve might be more than the first man and woman in a sacred story. They might also be the first picture of a wound that entered the human heart and never fully left. That idea changes the entire weight of Genesis. The story stops being only about a garden, a command, a serpent, and a fall. It starts to feel like a story about us.
About the Garden of Eden, the most spectacular place, the beginning where everything happened. God created this.
In this reading, the greatest loss was not just the leaving of Eden as a place. It was the breaking of something inside the human person. Before that moment, Adam and Eve are often imagined as living in peace, innocence, and closeness with God. After it, everything changes. They see themselves differently. They feel exposed. They hide. They become afraid. They blame. For the first time, they seem to feel the pain of being cut off from the peace they once knew. That is what makes the story so powerful and so unsettling. It suggests that the real tragedy was not only exile from a beautiful garden, but the birth of inner conflict. Humanity became divided within itself. Love was now mixed with fear. Desire was mixed with shame. Nearness to God was replaced by distance, silence, and longing. In a single moment, human life became marked by loss. That is why this reading feels so haunting. Adam and Eve stop feeling like distant figures from the far past. They begin to feel like the first mirror of every person who has ever battled guilt, confusion, regret, fear, or the sense that something precious has been lost. Their story becomes more than the opening of Scripture. It becomes the opening of the human condition itself, and of the human condition itself, and that is what makes it so hard to forget. It speaks to the ache many people carry but cannot explain. The feeling that life is full on the outside and yet missing something deep within. That is why the question lingers long after the answer ends. It is not only asking who the first humans were, it is asking what happened to us. When Grok was asked about the first humans, many expected a simple and direct answer. Instead, it gave a much deeper response than anyone expected. What exactly did Grok reveal about man? And why does its answer feel so disturbing to ordinary people? Let's uncover the shocking details. The loss within. This is where the story begins to feel deeply unsettling. Adam and Eve do not simply lose a beautiful garden. They lose a way of living that was whole, calm, and close to God. Before that moment, there is peace. There is innocence. There is no hiding, no fear, no inward struggle. Then everything changes. Their eyes are opened, but what they gain is not freedom. It is the painful knowledge of separation. They see themselves differently. They feel exposed. They become aware of guilt. And from that point on, the story carries a sadness that reaches far beyond the borders of Eden. What makes this part so powerful is that the loss is not only outward. Yes, they are sent out of the garden. Yes, they lose a sacred place. But the deeper loss happens inside them. Shame enters the heart. Fear enters the mind. Blame enters their relationship. Instead of peace, there is tension. Instead of trust, there is distance. Instead of open closeness, there is hiding. That is why the story does not read like a simple account of punishment. It reads like the first moment human beings became strangers to their own peace. This is also the point where the story stops feeling far away. It no longer sounds like something that happened only to two people long ago. It starts to sound painfully familiar. People still hide. People still fear being fully seen. People still blame others to avoid their own guilt. People still live with inner conflict, wanting what is right, but feeling pulled in another direction. That is what makes the story feel alive. It speaks to something people still carry every day. That is why Grock's answer felt so disturbing to many. It pointed to the idea that the fall was not just one event buried in the past. It may still be unfolding in every human life now. Every time peace gives way to shame, every time love is damaged by fear, every time people feel cut off from truth, from God, or from the best part of themselves, the story seems to begin again. It suggests that Eden was lost once in history, but its echo can be heard in every soul. And that is what makes it haunting. It is not only about them, it is also about us. Grock reveal how Adam and Eve lost peace through what happened in the Garden of Eden. But what exactly does the Garden of Eden really mean? Did it truly represent perfect peace? And what does it mean for humanity to lose such a place? Now, let us explore the hidden loss of Eden and the shattering of human wholeness. Beyond the garden. When you look at Eden this way, it stops feeling like nothing more than a place on a map. It becomes something much deeper, a condition of complete peace, perfect balance, and unbroken closeness with God. Adam and Eve were not simply standing in a lovely garden surrounded by beauty. They were living in a kind of wholeness that most people can barely imagine. There was no shame in them, no fear pressing on their hearts, no confusion pulling them in opposite directions. They did not feel split inside themselves. Their minds, hearts, and spirits were at rest. That is what makes the story so powerful. The true loss was not only the loss of a beautiful home filled with life, light, and abundance. The deeper loss was the breaking of that inner peace. Once that harmony was damaged, everything changed. Adam and Eve did not just step outside a garden gate. They stepped out of fullness itself. They moved from peace into struggle, from clarity into confusion, from trust into fear. The change was not only around them, it happened within them. This is why the story carries such emotional weight. It suggests that Eden was not precious only because of its rivers, trees, and beauty. It was precious because of what human beings were while they lived there. They were whole, they were open, they were close to God without hesitation or distance. Once that state was lost, they became aware of themselves in a painful new way. They could now feel a lack. They could feel separation. They could feel the ache of no longer being what they once were. That idea makes the story hit much harder than a simple account of being sent away from a sacred place. It turns Eden into a symbol of the human soul in its original peace, and the fall into the moment that peace was broken. In that sense, the story is not only about where Adam and Eve lived, it is about what humanity once carried and what it lost. That is why the account still moves people so deeply. It speaks to the quiet feeling many carry inside, the sense that something important is missing, something pure, something whole, something they were made to know but somehow no longer fully possess in this life today. Beyond the Garden of Eden being a place of solace and peace, what does it truly mean to lose such a place? And who bears responsibility for losing such a precious place? Now, let's unravel how Adam and Eve became the first reflection of guilt. The human heart exposed. This is where the story moves out of the distant past and into the center of human life. Adam and Eve stop feeling like remote figures from sacred pages and begin to look painfully familiar. They hide when shame rises. They fear being seen. They shift blame when guilt becomes too heavy to bear. In those simple but piercing moments, their story starts to mirror our own. They reflect the fear, weakness, and confusion that still live in people today. What seemed like ancient scripture suddenly feels personal, revealing Adam and Eve as the first portrait of the human heart. That is what makes their story so gripping. It is not only about one act of disobedience long ago, it is about what entered human life after that act. A deep inner split appears. They know something has changed, but they cannot fix it. They sense a distance between what they are now and what they once were, between the life they are living and the life they were meant to know. That gap is where the story becomes deeply human. It touches the part of life that people rarely know how to explain, the feeling that something inside is no longer whole. Most people know that feeling in one form or another. It shows up in guilt that lingers long after a mistake. It appears in the longing for peace that never seems to last. It can be felt in confusion, in regret, in the quiet ache of wanting to be better while still falling short. That is why Adam and Eve continue to matter. They are not only the first man and woman in a sacred account. They can also be seen as the first reflection of every person who has ever wrestled with shame, fear, desire, doubt, and the painful sense that something in them has gone wrong. The story becomes even more powerful when read this way because it explains why human beings often feel divided within themselves. People want goodness, yet they drift. They want love, yet they wound each other. They want truth, yet they hide from it. Adam and Eve capture that struggle at its beginning. Their story feels close because it is not only about them. It is about every human being who has ever felt the weight of inner conflict and the longing to become whole again. That is why their story still unsettles hearts.
From the very beginning, both men and women have been inclined to point the finger. Eve pointed toward the serpent and Adam pointed toward the woman.
Adam and Eve feared exposure and shifted blame after losing a place unlike any other. But what came after the loss of such a precious garden? Could any place ever be like it? Or was leaving the garden the very moment that shaped human existence? Let's uncover the shocking details. The Great Forgetting. One powerful way to understand the story is this. The worst result of the fall was not death in the ordinary sense, at least not at first. It was a kind of inner forgetting, a loss so deep that humanity no longer remembered what life once felt like in the presence of God. Adam and Eve not only lost safety, beauty, and endless life, they lost memory of a closeness that had once been natural, simple, and full of peace. That may be the most painful part of all. In this reading, the story is not only about punishment. It is about what happens when the human soul becomes separated from the source that gave it light, meaning, and rest. Adam and Eve become the first people to feel an emptiness they could not name but could no longer ignore. Something inside them had shifted. The peace they once lived in was now distant. The nearness they once knew was now hidden behind fear, shame, and struggle. They could still live, work, speak, and move through life, but they were no longer whole in the same way. That is what makes this idea so gripping even now. Many people know what it feels like to sense that something important is missing, even when life looks fine on the outside. There can be success, comfort, noise, and activity. Yet deep inside, there is a quiet ache. A person may not know exactly what has been lost, but the feeling remains. That is why Adam and Eve can seem so close to modern life. Their story can be read as the first account of human beings living with a hunger that no earthly thing could fully satisfy. They had touched something greater, then lost it, and from that moment forward, the human heart carried the memory of absence. This makes the story feel current. People keep searching for fullness in relationships, work, pleasure, status, or control, yet the search often leaves them tired rather than healed. The old story explains that sadness. It suggests the deepest wound of humanity is not only that we die, but that we live cut off from the fullness we were made to know. That is why the story still stirs people. It speaks to a missing piece that people can feel, but cannot restore alone. Grock presents Adam and Eve as the first people to feel an emptiness they could neither name nor ignore. But could the name Adam have a deeper relationship to humanity itself? And what does his existence reveal about human nature as a whole? Now, let us uncover how the name Adam opens the story of all humanity, more than one man. This is one of the points that makes the story feel richer and more powerful, without pulling it away from its main meaning. Many people hear the name Adam and think only of one man standing at the beginning of history. But in Hebrew, the word Adam can mean more than a personal name. It can also mean human or the human. That small detail opens the door to a much bigger reading of the story. In the Eden account, the phrase Ha-Adam often appears, and it is usually better understood as the human, rather than simply Adam as a fixed personal name. That matters because it changes the way the story sounds. Instead of reading it only as the story of one single man in the distant past, we begin to hear it as the story of humanity itself. The figure of Adam still matters as an individual, but he also starts to represent something larger. He becomes a window through which the text speaks about all people. That gives the story a wider frame and a deeper emotional pull. Adam is no longer only a character from the opening lines of Scripture. He becomes a picture of the human condition. His choices, his fear, his confusion, and his loss begin to reflect the struggle of the whole human family. What happens to him is not only his private story. It becomes a story about what happened to us. This is one reason Genesis still speaks with such force. It is not merely recalling one man from a distant past, it is revealing the beauty and weakness found in every human life. Adam can be seen as one person, yet also as a picture of all people at once. That wider meaning makes the story richer, not weaker. It turns an ancient account into something deeply personal, showing how human beings can carry dignity, failure, hope, and hurt all within the same heart today. It suggests that when Adam hides, humanity hides. When Adam fears, humanity fears. When Adam feels the pain of separation, humanity feels it too. That is why this detail matters so much. It turns the story from a distant beginning into an ongoing human mirror, one that still speaks with force, because it is not only about the first man, it is about all of us. It reaches across time and places every reader inside Eden's deeper meaning. Beyond the word Adam being connected to humanity, does the name still hold that meaning today? And what else does it reveal about human existence as a whole? Now, let's dive into how one ancient story came to explain humanity's broken nature. The changing meaning of Adam and Eve. The meaning of Adam and Eve did not stay fixed as the centuries passed. It grew, shifted, and became richer as different Christian thinkers tried to explain what the story meant for every human life. One important part of that change has to do with what people believed was passed down from Adam to the rest of humanity. Some early Christian thinkers did not read Paul as saying that every person inherited personal guilt from Adam in the strongest possible sense. Instead, many of them focused more on mortality and the human bent toward sin. In other words, they believed Adam's fall left the human family weak, wounded, and likely to go astray. The damage was real, but it was often understood more as a broken condition than as each person carrying Adam's guilt as if it were their own direct act. Later, Augustine gave that idea a sharper and more forceful shape. He argued more strongly that humanity inherited guilt itself, not only weakness or the tendency to sin. That view became highly influential and helped shape what many Christians later came to call the doctrine of original sin. Over time, that teaching became a formal way of describing the sinful state into which human beings are born. What makes this important is that the Hebrew Scriptures do not set out that later doctrine in such a defined form. The Genesis story speaks clearly about disobedience, loss, pain, exile, and death, but it does not present a fully developed teaching of hereditary guilt in the way later theology would. That means the story of Adam and Eve has always carried more than one layer of meaning. It has never been only a simple tale about one bad choice made long ago. That deeper history matters because it shows how many readers across the centuries have seen Adam and Eve as a picture of the human condition itself. Their story came to be read not only as the record of an ancient mistake, but as a way of explaining why human beings live with weakness, struggle, desire, fear, and moral failure. It became a story about what humanity is now, not only about what humanity once did, in so many ways. That is why Adam and Eve still feel so close. Their story was never only theirs. It became ours. The meaning of Adam and Eve has changed over time through the way people have understood their actions. But what does Grock say about the name, and how does it connect to the wider human story? Now, uncover how Adam and Eve became the first story of inner conflict and the search for what was lost. From Eden to exile. When these deeper layers are brought into view, the story of Adam and Eve begins to feel much larger than many people first imagined. It is no longer only a short account about how human life started. It becomes a rich and serious picture of what happened to humanity after something inside it broke. Adam and Eve are no longer only the first two people standing at the beginning of time. They become the first sign of exile, the first sign of moral struggle, the first sign of inner conflict, and the first sign of humanity's aching search to become whole again. That shift changes everything. The story stops being a simple lesson many heard as children and turns into something far more personal. Suddenly, Adam and Eve are not only figures from a distant sacred past, they begin to look like the first reflection of what every person knows at some level. People feel divided within themselves. They want what is good, yet they still fail. They long for peace, yet they carry restlessness. They want closeness with God, yet often feel distance, silence, or uncertainty. In that sense, the story no longer sits safely in the past. It moves close to the center of human life as it is lived now. This is why Grock's answer can feel so heavy. It does not leave Adam and Eve in the simple form many people first received. It takes the story out of its familiar frame and places it back among the biggest questions adults wrestle with. Why do people feel cut off from peace even when life seems full? Why does the human heart carry both love and fear, hope and shame, longing and regret? Why do people sense that they were made for something greater, yet struggle to live in a way that matches that sense? Once the story is read in that fuller way, it becomes more than a tale of origins. It becomes a way of talking about the brokenness people still feel, the conflict they still carry, and the wholeness they still seek. That is what gives it such force. That is why it never stays small. It reaches past childhood memory and speaks directly to adult pain, adult longing, and the quiet question many carry inside but rarely know how to say out loud. Grock presents Adam and Eve as the starting point of exile, moral struggle, inner division, and humanity's long search for restored wholeness.
Grok 4 is smarter than almost all graduate students. Pick anything, and we're talking about questions that it's never seen before. These are not on the internet. The reasoning capabilities of Grok are incredible.
But did those struggles pass down to later generations? And how does their first act still connect to the way people live today? Let's uncover the astonishing details. Ancient story, present ache. People today move through life surrounded by noise from morning to night. Phones light up without rest. Screens pull attention in every direction. Everyone is watching, posting, reacting, comparing, rushing, and trying to keep up. There is always something to chase, something to prove, something to consume, and something demanding attention. Yet beneath all that movement, many still carry a quiet ache. They feel restless even when they are busy. They feel exposed even when they look confident. They feel far from peace even when life appears full on the outside. That is why the story of Adam and Eve still feels so close. It does not stay trapped in some ancient setting that has nothing to do with modern life. It begins to feel like the first clear picture of something people still live with every single day. Their story is not only about two people in a garden long ago. It is about what happens when human beings become inwardly divided, when they begin to hide, when shame enters, and when peace seems to slip out of reach. The hiding in that story still feels familiar. People hide behind success, behind humor, behind anger, behind beauty, behind religion, behind work, and behind endless activity. They hide the parts of themselves they fear others might see. They hide wounds, regrets, fears, and failures. Adam and Eve did that first, and people have been doing it ever since. That is part of why their story still stings. It tells the truth about how quickly human beings cover themselves when something inside feels wrong. The shame feels familiar too. So does the hunger. So does the distance. People keep reaching for more, hoping the next thing will calm the heart. But the feeling often returns. More money, more attention, more pleasure, more success, more control, yet still no lasting rest. It is not only a search for comfort, it is often a search for something lost. That is what makes Adam and Eve feel less like distant names and more like the first mirror of human life. Their fear, their hiding, their longing, and their inner fracture still live on in people now. The setting is old, but the pain is current. That is why the story still speaks with such force. It touches something deep, something human, and something painfully unchanged. There seems to be a clear connection between the first behavior of Adam and Eve and what we still see in human life today. But does their story only explain where we came from? Or does it reveal something far deeper about the human condition? Now let us explore how the story of Adam and Eve becomes a living portrait of humanity's lost peace. The endless search for what the soul still remembers. This is why the answer stays with people long after they hear it. It does not fade like a strange theory or a passing idea. It lingers because it reaches into something deep and familiar. If Adam and Eve are not only the first humans in a sacred story, but the first sign of a fracture inside human life, then Genesis is doing far more than explaining where people came from. It is asking a harder and more personal question. What happened to us? What changed inside us? What did humanity become after peace gave way to fear and closeness gave way to distance? That question gives the story its lasting power. It suggests that Eden was not only lost in the past, something of that loss still echoes through human life now. The story becomes less about one moment behind us and more about a pattern that still continues. Adam and Eve leave the garden, but the deeper exile may be the one that moved into the human heart. Since then, people have kept living with the feeling that something is missing, something pure, something true, something they cannot fully name. That is why the story feels so close. It reaches people who have everything around them and still feel empty within. It speaks to those who smile in public but carry private fear. It speaks to those who want truth yet hide from it, who long for peace yet live with noise inside them, who sense they were made for more but cannot seem to find the path back. In that way, Genesis stops being only an old account from the beginning of Scripture. It becomes a mirror held up to every life. If this reading is true, then the story did not end when Adam and Eve stepped beyond Eden's gates. It continues in every person who feels cut off from peace, from truth, from God, or even from the best part of themselves. It continues in the struggle between love and fear, trust and shame, hope and regret. It continues in the deep human longing to return to a fullness people feel they were made for, even if they no longer know how to reach it. That is why the answer stays with people. It turns Genesis into far more than a story about how life began. It becomes a living picture of the life many are still struggling through now, marked by loss, longing, and a sense that something precious slipped away long ago. Deep inside, many still feel that ache, the feeling that what was lost has not yet been fully restored by effort. So, what do you think about Grock's revelation on the first humans? Could there be more to uncover about man's origin? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.